Have you ever had one of those nights that wasn't supposed to happen, but somehow changed everything? Tonight's story begins with a mistake. A janitor sitting at the wrong table, and a woman who couldn't stop smiling at him. It's the kind of story that reminds you, sometimes fate doesn't knock. It just walks in, drenched in rain, holding a bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in newspaper. But here's the twist. This wasn't love at first sight. It was something far rarer. It was recognition. Rain slid down the tall glass windows of a small French bistro, tapping softly like a lullaby. Inside, candles flickered, spoons clinked, and a pianist played a tune so gentle it almost felt shy. Madeline sat by the window, posture perfect, but her eyes told a different story. She was waiting. Her white blazer rested neatly over her shoulders, matching the elegance of a woman who carried entire companies on her back. But beneath that poise was something fragile, the quiet exhaustion of someone who hadn't let herself hope in a long time. She glanced at her watch. Again. 30 minutes late. One blind date, just one, her friend had said. He sounds perfect, Madeline. He wears a gray coat, works in finance. You need to at least meet him. And so she came. And now she wondered if she'd been stood up. The waiter passed by with a polite smile. She returned it, the kind of smile you give when your heart's already halfway out the door. Then the door chimed. A man stepped inside, shaking off the rain. He wasn't in a gray coat. He wasn't from finance. He wore a navy blue work uniform, cuffs a little worn, boots slightly muddy. On his chest, a name patch that read Luke. In his hands, a small bouquet of wildflowers, wrapped clumsily in old newspaper. Yellow, violet, and white. Damp, but somehow still alive. He wasn't here for a date. He was just trying to escape the rain after finishing his shift. But fate, or maybe just a nervous, inexperienced waiter, had other plans. The young waiter noticed him, smiled, and said, "Sir, your party is here. This way, please." Luke blinked, confused. Wait, what? But before he could finish, the waiter had already led him toward the window. Toward her. Madeline looked up. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the entire restaurant went silent. She took in his worn boots, his calloused hands, the bouquet half falling apart in his grip. Definitely not her date. He sat down anyway, awkward, unsure, eyes darting around like he just walked into the wrong universe. Madeline tilted her head, half smiling. "I think you've got the wrong table." Luke's eyes widened. He stood so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. Oh no, I'm so sorry. The waiter said, I thought," he stammered, laughing nervously. "I just wanted to stay out of the rain." And for the first time that night, she laughed. A real laugh. Small, but real. "Wait." He froze. She said, "You're not the man I was supposed to meet. But I hope you don't leave." The rain continued outside, steady and soothing. Luke hesitated. Then, slowly, he sat back down. The bouquet still trembled slightly in his hand. "Would you like to order something?" she asked. "Oh, no, I didn't mean to—" "Please," she interrupted, smiling. "Think of it as payment for being accidentally seated." He chuckled, a low, nervous sound. "All right, just soup and some bread, then." The waiter left. Luke peeled off his gloves, laying them carefully beside the silverware. His hands were rough, the kind of hands that worked for a living, not typed emails or held boardroom pens. They looked out of place here. And yet they didn't. Madeline glanced at the flowers on the table. "So, who are those for?" He smiled sheepishly. "My daughter, she picked them. Said I should give them to someone kind." Madeline laughed, a surprised, genuine sound. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached across the table, took the bouquet, and slipped it into her water glass. The wildflowers tilted, damp and uneven, but in that glass, they looked right. Something shifted. Luke leaned back, smiling faintly. Her name's Ava. She's 6, thinks pink dresses are a basic human right. Madeline grinned. She sounds like a handful. She is. She also has a stuffed bear named Sir Muffin. He runs her kingdom. That made her laugh again, louder this time, freer. And for the first time that night, the bistro didn't feel like a waiting room. It felt like a story beginning. The waiter brought soup, steam rising between them. Luke stirred it slowly. I don't think people are supposed to laugh when they're being a dad, a mom, and a plumber every night, he said softly. But Ava, she makes me believe I can. Madeline's expression softened. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. I was engaged once. He looked up surprised. We had just signed papers for our first house when the accident happened. He was gone before we moved in. I never unpacked. Luke said nothing. He didn't need to. He just folded a napkin carefully and handed it to her. She took it, eyes glimmering in the candlelight. She said, I didn't think anyone could understand that kind of loss. Not until night. They didn't speak for a while. The piano filled the silence, slow and tender. When the check came, neither moved to take it. They just sat. 2 strangers, connected by accident, but held there by something that didn't feel accidental at all. Outside, the man in the gray coat finally arrived. He looked through the window, saw Madeline laughing, the wildflowers in the glass, the man across from her. He paused, then turned around, and left without ever going inside. It was almost midnight when Luke pushed his mop bucket down the marble hallway of the 33rd floor. Usually he never came up this high. The floors up here gleamed, spotless, untouched. But tonight, there was a leak in the executive pantry. He opened the door quietly. The faint sound of paper shuffling echoed inside. Madeline stood by the window, sorting through files. She turned and froze. He froze, too. No candlelight, no piano, just white office LEDs and silence. He took off his cap. Ma'am, he said softly. She stared at him, the uniform, the mop, the man who'd sat across from her days ago. You work here, she said quietly. He nodded. I clean this floor every night. I've seen your name on the door. He smiled faintly. But at the restaurant, you didn't look like a CEO. You looked like someone who didn't want to be alone. She exhaled, voice trembling. And you didn't look like someone who cleaned floors. That night, he said, you didn't treat me like someone who did. There was no anger, no bitterness, just honesty. I'm the guy who mops your office, but that night, you called me a friend. Madeline looked down, voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Don't be. He turned, pushing the mop bucket toward the pantry. As he passed, she caught a faint scent of rain and soap. Behind him, she stood still, eyes heavy with something deeper than guilt. Regret. The rain came again, harder this time, drumming against the high-rise. Luke carried a little girl in a pink raincoat through the building's back entrance, Ava. She'd been sick at school. Fever, the teacher said, nothing serious. He couldn't find anyone to watch her, so he brought her along. Just for one night. He wrapped her in a blanket in the break room, gave her chocolate milk and said, Stay here, okay? I'll be right upstairs. She nodded seriously. Can Sir Muffin color too? Luke smiled. Only if he stays in the lines. 4 minutes later, Ava wandered out. The door to the CEO's office clicked open. Madeline looked up and blinked. A tiny girl in sparkly boots stood in the doorway, holding a crayon and a very tired stuffed bear. Ava looked at her curiously. "Are you a princess?" she asked. "What?" "Your hair. It's gold and curly, like the mom in my fairy tale book." Madeline laughed. Loud, genuine, surprised. "Well," she said, setting her coffee aside, "no one's called me a princess in a long time." Ava climbed into one of the armchairs, started drawing cats on sticky notes. Madeline laughed, loud, genuine, surprised. "Well," she said, setting her coffee aside, "no one's called me a princess in a long time." Ava climbed into one of the armchairs, started drawing cats on sticky notes. Madeline sat on the floor beside her, smiling like she hadn't in years. "You're pretty like a painting," Ava said. "Are you rich?" Madeline laughed harder this time. "I work a lot. That's kind of like being rich." They drew lopsided animals on pink sticky notes. Sir Muffin supervised. Then the door burst open. Luke stood there, breathless. "Ava!" She looked up, grinning. "Daddy, I found the princess!" Luke crouched beside her, heart pounding. "Sweetheart, you can't run off like that. You scared me." "I was looking for the bathroom," she said innocently. "Then I found her." He turned to Madeline, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry. Madeline raised her hand gently. "It's all right. She's a delight." Then softer, looking at Ava, not Luke, "You have a very brave explorer here." Ava handed her a sticky note. "It's you! I made your hair shiny!" Madeline smiled, holding it like it was priceless. Luke saw the way she looked at his daughter, not with pity, but with warmth. For a moment, it felt like the world was exactly as it should be. But that moment wasn't going to last. Because in just a few days, a powerful man in a sharp suit would say one cruel sentence, and everything between them would break. What he said, how Madeline reacted, and what Luke did next would change all three of their lives forever. Rain still fell that week, steady as regret, the kind that seeps into your thoughts long after the storm should have passed. Luke came in early that Monday, fixing a leak on the 33rd floor. Ava was with him again, still coughing a little, her cheeks pink with leftover fever. He set her up in the break room with her blanket and some crayons, kissed her top of the head, and told her he'd be right back. He didn't know today would change everything. Upstairs, the sound of polished shoes echoed down the hallway, sharp, confident, impatient. Chester Rollins had arrived, one of the company's biggest investors and one of its loudest critics. The kind of man who looked at people the way he looked at numbers, as things to be measured, used, replaced. When he spotted Luke crouched under the pantry sink, sleeves rolled up, gloves on, he stopped. The hallway went quiet. Rollins turned to his entourage and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "What's this? A janitor crawling around the executive floor? No wonder the stock's been dropping." A couple of nervous laughs followed, the kind people make when they're scared to disagree. Luke froze. He straightened slowly, met Rollins' eyes. "Just fixing a leak, sir. Won't be long." But Rollins wasn't listening. He was smirking, scanning Luke from head to toe, like he'd just found dirt on his Italian shoes. These floors are for executives, not people like that. And just then, a small pair of footsteps echoed behind them. Ava had wandered in, rubbing her eyes, her stuffed bear dragging on the floor. She stopped in the middle of the hallway, looked up at Rollins, then at her father. The silence was suffocating. Madeline stepped out of her office at that exact moment, her expression tight. She'd heard every word. Luke looked at her, just for a second, and in that second, everything hung in balance. Would she speak up? Would she stand beside him? Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. She looked away. She said nothing. Luke's jaw tensed. He looked down at his daughter, her small hand now clutching his pant leg. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly. "Let's go." He didn't look back. Not once. That night, after tucking Ava into bed, he packed his tools into an old cardboard box. Gloves, mop, a few rags, no note, no call, just silence. At the building's front desk, he left an envelope, his resignation. And somewhere, on the 33rd floor, Madeline sat alone, staring at her screen. The email's subject line read, "Luke Chambers, voluntary resignation." She reached for the cup of tea she'd made for Ava earlier that day. It was cold now. Next to it sat the paper bouquet. 3 colors, yellow, pink, and brown. The one Ava had made out of old sticky notes. Madeline picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. She told herself she wasn't crying, but her vision said otherwise. Days passed. The building stayed spotless, but the air felt wrong. Empty. The rhythm of her day was the same. Meetings, reports, polished smiles. But the pulse was gone. The silence in her office was too clean, too hollow. She worked harder, stayed later, kept the lights on long past midnight. If anyone asked why, she'd smile and say she was focused. But the truth was simpler. She was avoiding the sound of her own thoughts. The wildflowers Luke had once placed on her table were gone, but she remembered them. How they looked in that glass of water, awkward and alive. She missed that feeling of something imperfect being enough. Then one evening, as the sky burned gold against the city skyline, her intercom buzzed. "Miss Kingsley, there's something here for you, marked personal." "From who?" she asked. He didn't say, just dropped it off a few hours ago. Madeline hesitated, then took the elevator down. The lobby was almost empty, lights dimmed, city sounds muted behind the glass doors. On the counter sat a small plastic-wrapped bundle. Not flowers. Paper. A bouquet. Folded by hand, yellow, pink, and soft brown. The edges uneven, the folds imperfect. She recognized it instantly. Ava's drawings. Little hearts, crooked suns, smiling stig figures. Taped to the side was a note. Just one line written in Luke's familiar handwriting. "Thank you for giving me one evening to be someone." That was it. No name, no address. She sat down on the nearest bench, the paper bouquet pressed to her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she let the tears come. When the sun dipped below the skyline, she stood. Her eyes were red, but her face clear, determined. She knew what she needed to do. The streets were quieter here, narrower, rougher. Cracked sidewalks, chipped paint, laundry hanging between balconies. A neighborhood that felt alive in the way wealth could never buy. Madeline's heels clicked against the pavement until she stopped in front of a small brick walk-up. 3 floors, potted plants by the door, and that same ache in her chest that told her she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She took a breath, knocked. The door opened almost instantly. And there she was. Ava. Her pink dress dusted with flour, a streak of powdered sugar across her cheek, Sir Muffin dangling from one arm. The moment she saw Madeline, her eyes widened in pure wonder. She spun around. "Daddy, she's really here!" Madeline laughed softly, heart twisting at the sound of that little voice. Luke appeared in the doorway a moment later. His shirt was old, faded, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked surprised, then cautious. "Madeline," he said quietly. "Hi," she replied. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly, clutching a cream envelope. They stood there in silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, just heavy with everything unsaid. I know you heard what Rollins said, and I know you saw me say nothing. He didn't respond. His arms were crossed, eyes guarded. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of what it would mean if I stood by someone. She paused, her voice trembling. And I was wrong. I've stood alone for so long, Luke. I forgot what it felt like to choose someone, or let someone choose me. For a moment, her expression softened, then faded again, replaced with something quieter. A mix of hurt and disbelief. Before the silence could swallow them whole, Ava came bounding back into the room, clutching a juice box. Daddy told me you made me ginger tea, she said proudly. It made my tummy happy. Madeline laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks something open inside you. She crouched down until she was eye level with her. I missed you, pink dress girl, she whispered. Ava dropped Sir Muffin and threw her arms around Madeline's neck. Madeline hugged her tightly, her eyes closing for a long, shaking breath. When she finally stood, she was still holding Ava's small hand. She turned back to Luke, pulled an envelope from her coat pocket, and placed it gently on the counter. I know you didn't ask for this, but I want you to have it. Luke frowned slightly, opening the envelope. Inside were 2 papers. The first, a letter of recommendation, written by her, addressed to the city's facilities director. The second, a contract offer for a new position, maintenance supervisor, higher pay, flexible hours, benefits. He looked up confused. Why are you doing this? Madeline smiled faintly. Because you deserve to be seen, not as someone who mops floors, but as someone who builds them. He stared at her, eyes searching. You don't owe me anything. I know, but maybe this isn't about owing. Maybe it's about doing something right finally. Ava tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, can she stay for pancakes? Madeline blinked. Pancakes? Luke chuckled under his breath. It's her code for, please don't leave yet. Madeline laughed, the sound light but fragile. Well, I'd never say no to pancakes. The kitchen smelled like sugar and butter. Ava insisted on stirring the batter, even though half of it ended up on the counter. Luke flipped pancakes on an old pan that had clearly seen better days. Madeline leaned against the counter, watching, smiling, remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere that didn't demand perfection. Ava sat between them, humming a song only she seemed to know. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Madeline felt quiet inside. Not empty, just still. When she left that night, the air was cool. The rain finally gone. Luke walked her to the door, Ava fast asleep on his shoulder. She really missed you, he said. Madeline smiled softly. I missed her too. They stood there a moment longer, not as CEO and janitor, not as 2 people from different worlds, but as 2 hearts that had accidentally met in the middle. She turned to go. But before she did, she looked back. You know, she said gently, that night at the bistro, it wasn't an accident. It felt like one, but it wasn't. Luke's brow furrowed. What do you mean? She smiled, that small, secret kind of smile that carries a story inside it. Sometimes life seats us at the wrong table, just so we can meet the right person. He didn't answer. He just smiled back, the same quiet smile he had the night they met. As she walked down the old brick steps, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The light hit the street in gold streaks, catching on the laundry lines, the puddles, the window glass. And somewhere behind her, through the half-open door, came the sound of a little girl's laughter. Ava's voice, soft and bright, calling out, "Good guy, princess!" Madeline turned, waved, and whispered to herself, not for the camera, not for anyone, "Goodbye, pink dress girl." The screen would fade to black here, but if you listen closely, you'd still hear the rain. The kind of rain that doesn't bring sadness anymore, only memory. And maybe, if you stayed long enough, you'd realize some of the best stories don't start with a perfect plan. They start with a mistake. A janitor at the wrong table, and a woman who finally decided not to let him walk away again.